Sergeant Olivia Reeves adjusted the brim of her faded patrol cap as she stepped onto the training grounds of Fort Richardson. At 38, she had mastered the art of blending in, becoming the kind of soldier people's eyes would skip over in a formation. Her weathered combat boots, patched uniform, and the quiet efficiency with which she moved made her nearly invisible among the younger, louder recruits who dominated the base. But those same recruits who mocked her worn boots had no idea they would soon be following her into the most dangerous mission of their lives, or that her forgotten past would be the only thing standing between them and certain death. The morning. Sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as Olivia made her way toward the advanced infantry training complex. Fort Richardson wasn't the most prestigious posting in the army, but it had become something of a proving ground for special operations candidates before they moved on to more specialized training. Located in the remote mountains of northern Washington state, the base was designed to prepare soldiers for operations in rugged terrain and extreme conditions. Most importantly, it was far enough from D.C. that certain training exercises could happen without too many questions. Olivia had been assigned to Fort Richardson for the past 7 years as an infantry training instructor. Her official file listed her as a former logistics specialist who had retrained for infantry after the combat exclusion policy for women had been lifted. It was a plausible story, one that explained her presence without inviting further scrutiny. The truth, buried under layers of classified files and redacted mission reports, was something entirely different. She paused at the edge of the training complex, observing the new batch of recruits going through their morning PT. They were mostly men in their early 20s, with a few women scattered throughout the formation. All of them were in peak physical condition, the result of months of basic training and selection courses. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were candidates for the Army's elite special operations units, Rangers, Green Berets, Delta Force, the tip of the spear. "Morning, Sergeant Reeves," called Master Sergeant James Cooper, approaching from the direction of the barracks. Cooper was the senior enlisted leader for this training cycle, a former Ranger with 3 combat tours and a chest full of medals. At 45, he was one of the few people on base who outranked Olivia in terms of experience, if not official designation. "Morning, Master Sergeant," Olivia replied, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality she had cultivated over years of keeping people at a professional distance. "How's our new batch looking?" Cooper's weathered face creased into a frown. "Physically capable, mentally, we'll see. A lot of attitude in this group. Too many of them think they're already operators because they made it through selection." Olivia nodded, unsurprised. It was a common problem with candidates at this stage of training. They had survived the initial culling process that eliminated 70% of applicants, and many developed an inflated sense of their own abilities as a result. Reality would set in soon enough. "Colonel Mercer wants to see you in his office at 0900, Cooper added, checking his watch. "Something about the upcoming field exercise." Colonel William Mercer was the base commander, a decorated officer with a background in intelligence operations. His appointment to Fort Richardson had raised eyebrows in some quarters. A man with his qualifications would typically be assigned to the Pentagon or a major command center. The fact that he had specifically requested this posting had generated whispers among those who paid attention to such things. "I'll be there," Olivia said, already turning toward the administration building. Whatever Mercer wanted to discuss, it would be better to get it over with quickly. Field exercises were her responsibility, and she preferred to run them without interference from command. The administration building was a stark contrast to the rest of the base. Where the training facilities were utilitarian and weather-beaten, this structure was all gleaming glass and polished metal, a monument to the increasing bureaucratization of the military. Olivia always felt slightly out of place here. her worn uniform and scuffed boots marking her as a field operator rather than an office dweller. Colonel Mercer's assistant, a young specialist with immaculate uniform and perfect posture, glanced up as Olivia approached. "He's expecting you, Sergeant. Go right in." Mercer's office was predictably austere. A desk, 3 chairs, and walls decorated with unit insignias and commendation certificates rather than personal photographs. The colonel himself stood by the window, looking out over the training grounds, hands clasped behind his back in a posture that spoke of years of military discipline. "Sergeant Reeves," he said without turning around, "thank you for coming on such short notice." "Sir," Olivia replied, standing at attention just inside the doorway. Mercer turned then, his sharp blue eyes assessing her with the kind of attention that made most soldiers uncomfortable. At 50, he had the lean build of someone who still maintained the physical standards he demanded of his troops. His close-cropped grey hair and the lines around his eyes spoke of decades of service, much of it in places that didn't appear on official maps. "At ease, Sergeant," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs opposite his desk. "Please sit," Olivia complied, maintaining perfect posture even in the seated position. Mercer returned to his own chair, tapping a manila folder on his desk, one that Olivia noted bore no identifying markings. "I've been reviewing the training schedule for the next 8 weeks, Mercer began, his tone casual, in a way that immediately put Olivia on alert. Nothing about this conversation was going to be casual. "I'm particularly interested in the extended field exercise you've planned for the final phase." "Yes, sir, a 14-day mission in the Olympic mountain range. We'll be testing the candidate's ability to operate in small teams with minimal support, conduct reconnaissance of objective areas, and execute simulated direct action missions." Mercer nodded, opening the folder and scanning its contents. "Standard training scenario for this stage. However, I'd like to make some modifications to the exercise." Olivia kept her expression neutral, though internally her suspicions were growing. "What kind of modifications, sir?" "I want to incorporate a hostage rescue component," Mercer said, sliding a satellite image across the desk. "Specifically at this location." Olivia studied the image. It showed a compound of some kind, nestled in a valley between 2 mountains. The structure appeared to be a former logging operation, with a main building and several smaller outbuildings surrounded by a perimeter fence. "That's not on our designated training grounds, sir," she said carefully. "No, it's not. It's approximately 20 miles beyond our normal boundaries, in a remote area that's officially part of Olympic National Forest. However, the site itself is on a private in-holding, technically outside the jurisdiction of the National Park Service." Olivia felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. "May I ask who owns this property, sir?" Mercer's expression remained impassive. "Officially, it belongs to a timber company based in Oregon. Unofficially, we have reason to believe it's being used by a domestic extremist group for training purposes." And there it was. This wasn't about training at all. Mercer was planning an actual operation disguised as a training exercise. "Sir, with all due respect, if this is an active threat, shouldn't we be involving FBI or Homeland Security? This sounds like a law enforcement matter, not a military training scenario." Mercer's gaze hardened slightly. "Under normal circumstances, yes. But this particular group has connections that complicate matters. Several members are former military, including special operations personnel. They've been extremely careful to avoid giving federal authorities any legal justification for action." "And how does that change our involvement, sir?" "The posse comitatus act still applies. I'm well aware of the legal restrictions, Sergeant," Mercer replied, his tone cooling. "Which is why this will remain a training exercise in all official documentation. Your candidates will conduct reconnaissance of the area as part of their field training. They will not engage unless the situation dictates otherwise." Olivia maintained, her professional demeanor, but internal alarms were blaring. This was precisely the kind of grey area operation that had ended her previous career. Missions that existed in the shadowy space between military action and covert operations, where legal authorities blurred and deniability was built into the command structure. "And if the situation does dictate otherwise, sir," she asked. "Then we'll adapt accordingly," Mercer said smoothly. "The safety of your training team remains the priority, of course." Olivia knew better than to press further. In this meeting, Mercer clearly had authorization from someone well above his pay grade, or he wouldn't be proposing something this legally precarious. "I'll need more details about the objective and the intelligence you have on these extremists if I'm going to incorporate this into the exercise effectively," she said instead. Mercer nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. "Of course, Major Sullivan from Intelligence will brief you fully this afternoon. He has all the relevant information." He closed the folder and fixed her with an evaluating stare. "I selected you specifically for this, Sergeant Reeves. Your file may say logistics specialist, but we both know there's more to your background than that." Olivia felt a cold sensation spread through her chest. 7 years of careful anonymity, of being just another sergeant on a remote base, and now Mercer was casually indicating he knew about her past. She kept her expression neutral, with practiced ease. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "I think you do," Mercer replied, the hint of a knowing smile touching his lips. "Your transfer here 7 years ago came with some interesting caveats. Highly unusual for a simple logistics NCO to have. A personnel file that requires alpha-level clearance just to access the cover sheet." Olivia remained silent. There was nothing to be gained by confirming or denying his suspicions. Mercer seemed to appreciate her discretion. "Don't worry, Sergeant. Your secrets remain secure. I'm more interested in utilizing your skills than exposing your past. These candidates need someone with real-world experience leading them through this exercise, especially if it evolves beyond a simple training scenario." "Yes, sir," Olivia replied, recognizing the implicit order beneath his words. She was being tasked with this mission regardless of her reservations. "Excellent," Mercer said, standing to indicate the meeting was over. "Report to the Intelligence Center at 1400 hours for your briefing with Major Sullivan. You're dismissed." Olivia left the administration building with her mind racing. 7 years of careful obscurity, of building a new identity as a competent but unremarkable training sergeant, potentially unraveling, because Mercer had decided to run an off-the-books operation against domestic extremists. The irony wasn't lost on her. This was exactly the kind of situation that had led to her retirement from active service in the first place. As she crossed the parade ground, the morning PT session was breaking up, with recruits heading toward the mess hall for breakfast. A group of them passed her, their conversation carrying clearly in the crisp mountain air. "Man, did you see that instructor? The one with the ancient boots." One of them said, a tall recruit with the build of a college athlete. His name tape identified him as Martinez, Sergeant Reeves, another replied. Wilson, according to his uniform. Been here forever, apparently. Teaches land navigation and small unit tactics. "She looks like she's never seen action a day in her life," Martinez continued, oblivious to Olivia's presence behind them. "Probably pushed papers her whole career until they needed female instructors for show. Those boots look like they're from Desert Storm," a third recruit added with a laugh. Jenkins, a solidly built young man with a southern drawl. "My dad has a pair in his attic that look newer." Olivia didn't break stride as she passed them, but she allowed herself a small, tight smile. Her boots were worn because she'd put thousands of miles on them in places these recruits couldn't imagine. The right boot had a barely noticeable repair on the heel, where a piece of shrapnel had torn through the leather during an extraction in northern Syria. The left one had been partially melted and rebuilt after a close encounter with an IED in Afghanistan. The recruits fell silent as they realized she was within earshot, but their expressions, a mixture of embarrassment and defiance, told her everything she needed to know about their attitudes. They saw her as a relic, someone to be tolerated rather than respected. It was an assessment she had deliberately cultivated over the years, finding safety in being underestimated. Later that afternoon, Olivia sat in the secure briefing room of the Base Intelligence Center, reviewing the information Major Sullivan had provided about the extremist compound. The group called themselves the Sovereign Militia, a collection of anti-government extremists, white supremacists, and disaffected former military personnel who had established several training compounds throughout the Pacific Northwest. Their leader goes by the name Commander Gray, Sullivan explained, displaying a grainy surveillance photo on the screen. Former Marine Corps, served 2 tours in Iraq before being discharged under unclear circumstances. Real name is Eric Daniels. He's built quite a following among certain fringe elements, particularly those with military backgrounds who feel betrayed by the government. Olivia studied the image. Daniels was in his early 40s, with the build of someone who maintained a rigorous physical regimen. His eyes were hidden behind tactical sunglasses, but his posture and bearing screamed military training. "What are they planning?" she asked, flipping through the intelligence report. "You don't set up a compound like this just for weekend warrior." "Training." Sullivan's expression darkened. "That's where things get concerning. We've intercepted communications suggesting they're planning some kind of operation in the next 30 days. The details are vague, but there are references to multiple targets and a day of reckoning. And we don't have enough for a warrant. They're extremely security conscious. Communications are encrypted, meetings are held in areas swept for surveillance. And they've got sympathizers in local law enforcement who would tip them off if a formal investigation was launched." Olivia leaned back in her chair, considering the implications. "So instead, we're sending in a group of trainees to conduct reconnaissance on a potentially armed and dangerous domestic terrorist group. What could possibly go wrong?" Sullivan at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "The candidates won't know the real nature of the mission. As far as they're concerned, it's just another training objective. But I'll know," Olivia said flatly, "and I'll be responsible for their safety if things go sideways." "That's why Colonel Mercer selected you specifically," Sullivan replied. "Your background makes you uniquely qualified to handle this situation." Olivia didn't respond to the reference to her classified past. Instead, she focused on the practical aspects of the mission. "I'll need better intelligence on their defenses, personnel numbers, and daily routines before I take a team anywhere near that compound." Sullivan nodded, sliding another folder across the table. "We've been monitoring the site with drones for the past 3 weeks. This contains everything we know about their patterns of activity, guard rotations, and force composition." As Olivia reviewed the new information, a troubling picture emerged. The Sovereign Militia wasn't just playing soldier in the woods. They had established a sophisticated training compound with firing ranges, obstacle courses, and what appeared to be explosive testing areas. Drone footage showed approximately 30-40 individuals at the site, most of whom demonstrated the kind of disciplined movement that indicated military or law enforcement backgrounds. "They're well armed," she noted, examining a thermal image that clearly showed weapons caches in several buildings. "Yes," Sullivan confirmed. "We've identified AR-15 platforms, several sniper rifles, and what appeared to be improvised explosive devices. They also recently acquired body armor and night vision equipment through third-party purchases. This was no ordinary domestic extremist group. They were equipping and training like a paramilitary force, preparing for significant action." "What's this structure here?" Olivia asked, pointing to a reinforced bunker-like building near the center of the compound. Sullivan hesitated briefly. "We believe it's where they're holding 3 federal employees captive. Olivia's head snapped up. Hostages? You buried the lead here, Major. Who are they holding? Two FBI analysts and a Homeland Security cyber specialist, Sullivan replied, his voice dropping. They disappeared while investigating online extremist networks 3 weeks ago. Their vehicle was found abandoned near the Olympic National Forest boundary. We didn't make the connection until a drone picked up thermal signatures consistent with human captives in that building. And this is still not enough for a federal warrant? The evidence is circumstantial. We can't definitively prove the missing. Personnel are being held there, and the extremists have been careful not to communicate about captives on any monitored channels. Olivia set down the folder, a sense of cold fury building inside her. So instead of a proper hostage rescue operation with trained personnel, we're sending in a training class of candidates who don't even know what they're walking into. The operation needed to maintain deniability, Sullivan said defensively. If we send in a formal rescue team and we're wrong about the hostages being there, we've violated posse comitatus and potentially triggered exactly the kind of violent response these groups want. If it's part of a training exercise that happens to discover evidence of criminal activity, then it's legally justified subsequent action, Olivia finished for him. She understood the legal reasoning, even if she found it morally questionable. This is going to be a complex insertion with candidates who aren't ready for real-world hostage situations. Sullivan met her gaze directly. That's why you're leading it, Sergeant Reeves. Or should I say, Captain Morgan. Olivia's expression didn't change, but internally she felt the last walls of her carefully constructed identity beginning to crumble. Captain Alexandra Morgan had officially died 7 years ago during a classified operation in Yemen. That Sullivan knew the name meant Mercer hadn't just suspected her background. He had accessed files that only a handful of people in the entire Department of Defense should have been able to view. I don't know what you're talking about, Major, she said evenly. I'm Sergeant Olivia Reeves, and I have been for my entire military career. Sullivan had the good sense not to press the issue further. Of course, Sergeant, my mistake. He gathered his materials, preparing to conclude the briefing. Colonel Mercer wants the operation incorporated into the training schedule effective immediately. The candidates begin their field exercise in 72 hours. Olivia nodded, her mind already shifting to operational planning despite her reservations. If this mission was happening regardless of her concerns, she would ensure it was executed as safely as possible. These recruits, arrogant and dismissive though they might be, were still her responsibility. I'll need to adjust the team compositions, she said. The original plan had them operating in 4-person fire teams. For this kind of reconnaissance, I want 6-person elements with more experienced candidates in leadership positions. Whatever you think is best, Sullivan agreed. You have full tactical authority for the exercise. As the Major left, Olivia remained in the secure room, studying the intelligence materials and beginning to formulate a plan. If she was going to lead these recruits into a potentially dangerous situation, she needed to prepare them without revealing the true nature of their mission. It would require a delicate balance, pushing them hard enough to sharpen their skills while keeping them unaware that they might soon be using those skills in actual combat. The irony wasn't lost on her. After 7 years of hiding her past and pretending to be less than she was, circumstances were now forcing her to step back into the role she had abandoned. Captain Alexandra Morgan, the woman who had led some of the most dangerous hostage rescue operations in recent military history, was about to re-emerge, whether Olivia Reeves wanted her to or not. The training facility at Fort Richardson was, unlike any other in the Army's inventory, nestled between dense evergreen forests and rugged mountain terrain. It simulated the harsh conditions special operations forces might encounter around the world. The Advanced Combat Training Center featured multiple shooting ranges, urban warfare simulators, and a sprawling wilderness area used for survival training. This was where the elite came to be forged into something even more exceptional. Olivia stood before 24 recruits assembled in the briefing room, their faces a mixture of anticipation and thinly veiled skepticism. These were the top performers. From the latest selection course, candidates who had already proven themselves physically superior and mentally resilient. They represented the Army's future special operators, and they knew it. "Listen up," she began, her voice lacking the theatrical command presence many instructors adopted. "In 48 hours, you'll begin your final field exercise. 14 days in the Olympic Mountains with minimal support, conducting reconnaissance and simulated direct action missions against opposing forces." Lieutenant Marcus Reed, the officer overseeing the training cycle, stood at the back of the room. His precisely ironed uniform and polished boots contrasted sharply with Olivia's weathered appearance. At 32, Reed was ambitious and politically connected, exactly the type of officer who advanced quickly in peacetime. He had combat experience from a single tour in Afghanistan, which he mentioned frequently. "Sergeant Reeves will be your primary field instructor for this exercise," Reed announced, unable to completely mask his own skepticism. Despite appearances, the sergeant has extensive experience with this type of training. Olivia ignored the backhanded introduction. "You'll operate in 4-person teams, each with specific objectives. These objectives will test your navigation skills, tactical decision-making, and ability to operate independently under pressure." From the third row, Recruit Martinez, the same one who had mocked her boots earlier, raised his hand. "Sergeant, will we be conducting any live-fire exercises during the operation?" There was an eagerness in his voice that Olivia had heard too, many times before. The sound of someone who had never experienced actual combat, yet craved its adrenaline. She studied him for a moment, noting the perfect posture, the confident set of his jaw, the barely concealed ambition in his eyes. "This isn't a video game, Martinez," she replied evenly. "When you're facing hypothermia in a mountain snowstorm, whether your ammunition is live or blank becomes the least of your concerns." The equipment room buzzed with activity as the recruits prepared their gear for the upcoming field exercise. Tactical vests were adjusted, communication devices checked, and rucksacks packed with scientific precision. Everything these candidates carried represented the cutting edge of military technology. Lightweight body armor, advanced night vision systems, and communication equipment that could maintain contact in the most challenging terrain. Captain James Reynolds, leader of the opposing force that would challenge the recruits during their exercise, stood observing the preparations with arms crossed over his broad chest. At 35, Reynolds had the weathered look of a career soldier with multiple combat deployments. The jagged scar running along his jawline hinted at close encounters that had nearly ended badly. "Impressive bunch," he remarked as Olivia approached. "Physically, at least." "They've got the skills," Olivia agreed. "It's judgment I'm concerned about." Reynolds nodded toward Martinez, who was demonstrating the latest tactical reloading technique to an admiring group of fellow recruits. "That one seems like a natural leader." "Natural showman," Olivia corrected. "Hasn't learned the difference between being in charge and being responsible." Her comment drew a knowing smile from Reynolds. They had worked together on enough training rotations to develop a professional shorthand, though he knew nothing of her classified background. To him, she was just an unusually competent NCO with an understated approach to leadership. "Word is, Colonel Mercer has taken a personal interest in this exercise," Reynolds said, lowering his voice. "Changed some of the parameters, added objectives." Outside the usual training areas, Olivia maintained her neutral expression. "Training evolves, we adapt." Before Reynolds could probe further, Lieutenant Reed entered the equipment room, his presence immediately drawing the recruits to attention. The young officer surveyed the preparations with a critical eye, occasionally adjusting an item of equipment or questioning a recruit about their loadout. "Sergeant Reeves," he called, beckoning her over to where Martinez and 3 other recruits were gathered. "These men have a concern about the equipment allocations." Martinez stood slightly forward of his peers, clearly the spokesperson. "Sergeant, with respect, we've been issued standard night vision monoculars rather than the dual-tube panoramic systems. If we're operating in mountainous terrain at night, the limited field of vision could be dangerous." The request wasn't unreasonable, but the tone, somewhere between demanding and condescending, set Olivia's teeth on edge. Martinez was addressing her with the perfunctory sergeant, while his eyes constantly shifted to Lieutenant Reed, clearly considering the officer the real authority. "The equipment assignments are intentional," Olivia replied. "In actual operations, you won't always have access to the latest technology. Sometimes batteries fail, sometimes equipment breaks, sometimes you have to complete the mission with whatever you have available. But this is training," Martinez persisted. "Shouldn't we be using the best tools available to learn proper techniques?" Lieutenant Reed nodded slightly, apparently finding merit in the recruit's argument. "Perhaps we could reconsider the NVG assignments, Sergeant. After all, these men have earned their place in this program." Olivia met Reed's gaze directly. "Lieutenant, may I speak with you privately?" They stepped away from the group, moving to a corner of the equipment room, where their conversation wouldn't be overheard. The lieutenant's expression suggested he already anticipated her objection and found it tiresome. "These are exceptional candidates," Reed began before she could speak. "We should be challenging them with advanced scenarios, not artificial equipment limitations. With respect, sir, coddling them with the best gear available doesn't prepare them for real-world contingencies," Olivia countered. "I've seen operators freeze when their technology fails because they never learned to function without it." Reed's expression hardened slightly. "And when exactly did you observe this, Sergeant? During your time in logistics?" The barb was deliberate, designed to remind her of her supposed background and limited combat experience. It took considerable self-control for Olivia not to respond with details of operations where she'd seen elite units compromise missions through over-reliance on technology, operations that would immediately reveal her classified history. "I've been running this training cycle for 7 years, sir," she said instead, "and I've tracked the performance of graduates in their subsequent deployments. The ones who succeed aren't those with the best gear. They're the ones who learned to adapt when things went wrong." Reed studied her for a moment, clearly weighing whether this was a battle worth fighting. "Fine, standard NVGs it is." He turned back toward the recruits. "But I expect you to push them in other ways, Sergeant. These aren't ordinary soldiers." "No, sir, they're not," Olivia agreed, "which is exactly why they need to learn these lessons now, before lives depend on them." As Reed walked away, Olivia noticed Martinez watching the exchange with obvious disappointment. The recruit had clearly expected the lieutenant to override her decision. His expression shifted to thinly veiled contempt when she caught his eye, before he quickly masked it with military professionalism. That evening, Olivia sat alone in the small office she'd been assigned, reviewing satellite imagery of the terrain where the exercise would take place. The Olympic Mountains were unforgiving. Dense forests, steep ridgelines, and unpredictable weather patterns that could change from clear skies to blinding snowstorms within hours. Adding a covert reconnaissance of the extremist compound would significantly increase both the complexity and risk of the exercise. A knock at the door interrupted her planning. Master Sergeant Cooper entered without waiting for a response, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He placed one on the desk in front of her and settled into the room's only other chair with a weary sigh. "Thought you could use this," he said. "Heard about the equipment debate with Reed." Olivia accepted the coffee gratefully. "News travels fast." "Small base," Cooper shrugged. Plus, Martinez has been complaining to anyone who will listen about the outdated training methods of certain instructors. Let me guess, particularly the female instructor with the worn-out boots. Cooper's weathered face creased in a smile. You've made quite an impression on him. Not the one you intended, maybe, but definitely memorable. Olivia sipped her coffee, considering the implications. It doesn't matter what they think of me. What matters is that they learn what they need to survive. And will they learn what they need? Cooper's question carried more weight than his casual tone suggested. Word is, Mercer has something unusual planned for this exercise. Olivia studied the Master Sergeant carefully. Cooper was old-school Army, the type who noticed everything but spoke rarely. If he was raising concerns, they were likely justified. The parameters have been adjusted, she acknowledged without elaborating. Cooper nodded, understanding her discretion. Just make sure you're not being set up as the fall person if things go sideways. Officers like Mercer and Reed have a way of ensuring NCOs take the blame when their plans don't work out. The warning was delivered matter-of-factly, without drama or emphasis, which made it all the more significant. Cooper wasn't given to baseless speculation or conspiracy theories. If he sensed something off about the command's intentions, Olivia needed to pay attention. I appreciate the concern, she said carefully, but I can handle whatever comes. Cooper studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. You know, in all the years you've been here, I've never once heard you talk about your service before Fort Richardson. Most NCOs can't shut up about their previous postings, but it's like you appeared fully formed the day you arrived. The observation hung in the air between them, not quite a question, but definitely an invitation to elaborate. Olivia met his gaze steadily, recognizing the gentle probe of a fellow professional who had noticed the inconsistencies in her background. Some postings are more memorable than others, she replied neutrally. Dawn broke cold and grey over Fort Richardson as the 24 recruits assembled on the tarmac, rucksacks and equipment lined up with military precision for final inspection. A light drizzle had begun to fall, the kind of persistent mountain rain that soaked through layers of clothing and chilled to the bone. Perfect training weather, as far as Olivia was concerned. Discomfort was an excellent teacher. Final gear check, she announced, moving down the line of recruits with Master Sergeant Cooper flanking her. Once we board those helicopters, there's no coming back for forgotten equipment. The transport helicopters, 2 Black Hawks modified for training operations, sat at the far end of the airfield, rotors occasionally turning in slow circles as the pilots conducted their pre-flight checks. They would ferry the teams to 4 different insertion points across the Olympic mountain range, where the exercise would officially begin. Lieutenant Reed approached, clipboard in hand, his rain jacket immaculately new compared to Olivia's weathered parka. Teams are assigned as follows, he announced. Alpha Team, Martinez, Wilson, Chen, and Diaz. Bravo Team, Jenkins, Rodriguez, Patel, and Cooper. Charlie Team, Washington, Kim, Alvarez, and Turner. Delta Team, Bishop, Ramirez, Peterson, and Singh. The groupings weren't what Olivia had recommended. She had deliberately structured the teams to balance strengths and weaknesses, placing the more experienced recruits with those who needed additional support. Reed's assignments instead clustered the highest performers together in Alpha Team, essentially creating a showcase squad led by Martinez. Lieutenant, she said quietly, these aren't the team compositions we discussed. Reed's expression remained professionally neutral. Colonel Mercer approved these assignments personally. He wants to see how our top performers function as a unit. Translation: Mercer wanted Martinez's team to conduct the reconnaissance of the extremist compound. Olivia kept her face impassive, but internally alarm bells were ringing. Sending the most aggressive and least cautious recruits to observe a potentially hostile force was asking for trouble. Sir, with all due respect, I believe the balanced teams would provide better training value, she persisted. In real operations, you rarely get to choose who you work with. The assignments stand, Sergeant, Reed replied, his tone making it clear further discussion was unwelcome. Colonel's orders? Olivia nodded once, sharply. Yes, sir. As Reed moved away to continue the pre-mission briefing, Cooper leaned closer to Olivia. Politics, he muttered. Martinez's father is a congressman on the Armed Services Committee. Mercer's setting the kid up for success. That explained some things, but raised more concerns. If Martinez was being groomed for advancement because of family connections rather than merit, it suggested a command structure more focused on appearances than operational effectiveness. Precisely the kind of environment where missions went wrong and people died unnecessarily. Team leaders, front and center, Olivia called, gathering Martinez, Jenkins, Washington, and Bishop around her. You'll each receive sealed mission packets once you reach your insertion points. The packets contain your initial objectives and rendezvous coordinates. Primary communication checks will occur at 600 and 1800 daily. Emergency channel is frequency Delta 6. She made eye contact with each team leader in turn, lingering slightly longer on Martinez. This exercise simulates real-world conditions. The opposing force has been instructed to treat this as an actual combat scenario. They will use every advantage, terrain, weather, superior numbers, to compromise your mission. You will be evaluated not just on whether you complete your objectives, but how you adapt when things inevitably go wrong. Martinez squared his shoulders, a confident smile playing at the corners of his mouth. We're ready, Sergeant. Alpha Team won't let you down. There was that eagerness again, the hunger of someone who viewed combat as an adventure rather than the life or death struggle Olivia knew it to be. She'd seen that same expression on too many faces over the years, usually right before reality delivered its harsh lessons. This isn't about impressing me, Martinez, she replied evenly. It's about keeping your team alive and completing the mission, those priorities, in that order. As the briefing concluded and the recruits made final preparations to board the helicopters, Lieutenant Reed approached Olivia again. Colonel Mercer wants you with Alpha Team, he said without preamble. You'll be observing their performance. Directly, Olivia frowned. Sir, I'm scheduled to coordinate from the command post with Master Sergeant Cooper. We need experienced eyes monitoring all teams. Change of plans, Reed replied. The Colonel believes your expertise will be most valuable in the field with our priority team. The implication was clear. Mercer wanted her with the team that would be approaching the extremist compound. Not just observing from a distance, but actively involved. The question was whether this represented confidence in her abilities or an attempt to implicate her directly if the operation went sideways. Understood, sir, she said finally. I'll need a few minutes to adjust my gear. Reed nodded and moved toward the helicopters, where the pilot was signaling readiness. Olivia turned to Cooper, who had overheard the exchange. I don't like this, Sergeant, he said quietly. They're changing parameters minutes before launch. Adapt and overcome, Olivia replied with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Keep eyes on the other teams. If anything feels off, anything at all, pull them back to safe territory immediately. Cooper's weathered face creased with concern. And what about you? Who pulls you back if things go south? Olivia's hand unconsciously moved to the worn leather sheath on her belt, a knife she'd carried for over a decade, through countries and conflicts that didn't exist in official records. I've made it back from worse situations. The Master Sergeant studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Watch your six. Those recruits may think they're hot shit, but they've never been tested for real. I know, Olivia said, shouldering her rucksack and checking her sidearm one final time. That's what worries me. 20 minutes later, she sat in the vibrating interior of the Black Hawk, surrounded by Alpha Team. Martinez, Wilson, Chen, and Diaz performed final equipment checks with the practiced motions of soldiers who had drilled these procedures hundreds of times. Their expressions were a mixture of excitement and concentration, the look of young warriors eager to prove themselves. The helicopter banked sharply, following the contours of a mountain ridge to maintain terrain masking. Through the open side, Olivia could see the landscape transitioning from the managed forests near Fort Richardson to the truly wild territory of the Olympic mountain range. Dense, evergreen canopy, occasionally broken by rocky outcroppings and swift-flowing streams. 10 minutes to insertion point! The pilot's voice crackled through her headset. Olivia studied the 4 recruits, assessing them with the experienced eye of someone who had selected operators for missions where failure meant death. Martinez was physically impressive and tactically sound, but his cockiness worried her. Wilson was quieter, more methodical, a good counterbalance if Martinez would listen to him. Chen had demonstrated exceptional navigation skills during previous exercises. While Diaz was the team's best marksman, they were good, perhaps even exceptional by standard training metrics. But they weren't ready for what awaited them if the extremist compound turned into an actual combat situation. The gap between training excellence and combat effectiveness was one that could only be bridged through experience. Experience none of them had. "Remember," she said, her voice barely audible above the helicopter's roar, "no unnecessary risks. Complete the objective and extract. This isn't a competition to see who can be the most aggressive." Martinez nodded, but the gleam in his eyes suggested he viewed her caution as the hesitancy of an instructor who had never seen real action. If only he knew the truth, that the woman he dismissed as a paper pusher had conducted more high-risk operations than most special forces operators would see in their entire careers. The helicopter descended rapidly toward a small clearing, hovering momentarily before touching down. "Go! Go! Go!" the crew chief shouted. Alpha Team deployed with practiced efficiency, establishing a perimeter around the landing zone as they had been trained. Olivia followed, noting their textbook execution of the maneuver. As the helicopter lifted off, disappearing quickly behind a ridge, the sudden silence of the forest enveloped them. Only the sound of wind through the evergreens and the distant cry of a hawk broke the stillness. "Establish security and prepare to move out," Martinez ordered, already consulting his GPS for their position relative to their first objective. Olivia hung back, allowing the team to operate according to their training. Her role, officially, was to observe and evaluate, though the sealed orders in her pocket, to be opened only when they reached their first checkpoint, might change that dramatically. The first objective was a straightforward land navigation exercise. Locate 3 checkpoints hidden across 2 miles of dense forest within a 4-hour window. Alpha Team moved with the confidence of soldiers who had excelled at this task repeatedly during training. Martinez set a brisk pace at point position, occasionally consulting his compass and map to verify their bearing. "We should hit the first checkpoint in approximately 20 minutes, he announced, gesturing toward a ridgeline ahead. "Chen, take rear security. Wilson, left flank. Diaz, right flank. Standard patrol formation." Olivia followed behind Chen, deliberately positioning herself where she could observe the entire team. Their movement was technically sound, maintaining proper intervals, using appropriate hand signals, scanning their sectors effectively. But she noticed subtle indicators of their inexperience, the slight hesitation before navigating difficult terrain, the unnecessary rustling of equipment when changing positions, the tendency to focus too much on the map and not enough on environmental cues. The first checkpoint was located exactly where Martinez had predicted, a small orange marker, concealed beneath a fallen log. He recorded the verification code with obvious satisfaction. "1 down, 2 to go," he said, allowing himself a brief smile. "We're making good time." Maybe too good, Olivia remarked, studying the surrounding forest. This exercise is supposed to challenge you. If it feels easy, you're probably missing something. Martinez's expression flickered between annoyance and doubt. With respect, Sergeant, we're simply executing efficiently. The terrain is challenging, but nothing we haven't trained for. The terrain isn't your only obstacle, she replied, gesturing toward the forest floor. You've been leaving tracks a blind man could follow. In a real operation, you'd have compromised your position multiple times already. The recruits exchanged glances, uncertainty replacing their earlier confidence. Diaz knelt to examine their trail, frowning as he recognized the clear footprints they'd left in the soft forest soil. She's right, he admitted reluctantly. We need to be more careful about our sign. Martinez nodded curtly, acknowledging the criticism without verbally conceding the point. We'll adjust our movement technique. Chen, take point for the next leg. Focus on minimizing our trail. The team continued toward their second objective, now moving more deliberately, placing each step with greater care. Olivia noted the improvement with silent approval. They were learning, adapting to feedback, and incorporating it immediately. That was a good sign. The second checkpoint proved more challenging, concealed within a dense thicket of undergrowth halfway up a steep slope. Chen located it efficiently, demonstrating the keen environmental awareness that had distinguished her during previous exercises. Final checkpoint should be northeast of our position, approximately 1 kilometer, Martinez said after recording. The verification code. We're still well within our time parameters. As they prepared to move out, Olivia quietly retrieved a small sealed envelope from her pocket, the special instructions Colonel Mercer had provided for Alpha Team. According to the mission timeline, this was the moment to reveal their additional objective. Hold position, she ordered, drawing surprised looks from the recruits. We have new instructions. She broke the seal and extracted a folded document, scanning its contents quickly. As she suspected, the orders directed Alpha Team to conduct reconnaissance of the extremist compound, with specific instructions to observe and report on security measures, personnel movements, and potential entry points. Change of plans, she announced, keeping her tone neutral despite her internal concerns. We have a priority intelligence objective approximately 3 kilometers east of our current position. Martinez accepted the document, reading it with growing excitement. A live observation post against an actual target? He couldn't keep the eagerness from his voice. This is beyond standard training parameters. Because it's not standard training, Olivia replied. This is a special evaluation of your team's capabilities. The target is a suspected training facility for a non-specified group. Our mission is observation only. We gather intelligence and withdraw without detection. The recruits straightened, pride evident in their postures. Being selected for a non-standard mission was a significant vote of confidence from command, exactly the kind of distinction that could fast-track careers. What's the opposition look like? Wilson asked, the most tactically minded of the group. Olivia chose her words carefully, providing enough information to ensure their preparation without revealing the true nature of the extremist compound. Approximately 30-40 personnel with varying levels of training. They maintain regular security patrols and have observation posts covering likely approach routes. Consider them equipped with standard small arms and potentially night vision capabilities. Sounds like a challenge, Martinez said, unable to hide his enthusiasm. But nothing we can't handle. Olivia fixed him with a steady gaze. This isn't about handling anything, Martinez. It's about observing without being detected. If you're discovered, the mission is compromised, and we withdraw immediately. Is that clear? Crystal clear, Sergeant, he replied, though the gleam in his eyes suggested he viewed the assignment as an opportunity to distinguish himself rather than a serious operational task. We'll establish an observation post here, Olivia continued, indicating a ridgeline on the map that overlooked the compound's location. It offers good visibility while providing multiple exfiltration routes if we need to withdraw quickly. The team reoriented their movement, now heading toward the new objective with heightened focus. Olivia noticed an immediate change in their demeanor. A sharper attention to security, more deliberate communication, increased situational awareness. The prospect of a real-world target, even in a training context, had transformed them from students practicing procedures to soldiers executing a mission. As they traversed the increasingly rugged terrain, Olivia maintained a position that allowed her to observe both the team and their surroundings. Something felt wrong about this entire scenario. The hasty changes to the exercise parameters, Mercer's insistence on using trainees for what appeared to be actual intelligence gathering, the deliberate targeting of the extremist compound without proper authorization. 2 hours later, Alpha Team reached the ridgeline Olivia had designated. The valley below contained a sprawling compound that matched the intelligence briefing materials precisely, a former logging operation converted into a training facility, complete with shooting ranges, obstacle courses, and reinforced structures that could serve as defensive positions. Martinez set up observation positions with commendable efficiency, deploying Chen and Wilson with binoculars to catalog activity, while Diaz established a security perimeter. Olivia unfolded a compact spotting scope, focusing it on the central building where the intelligence suggested hostages might be held. Multiple armed sentries at the main entrance, Chen reported, her voice professionally detached. Regular patrol, in pattern approximately 15-minute intervals. Lookout towers at the north and south perimeters, Wilson added, each manned by a single observer with what appears to be a scoped rifle. Olivia noted their observations with growing concern. This was no amateur operation. The security protocols and deployment patterns suggested military training and tactical awareness beyond typical civilian militia groups. I count at least 20 personnel visible, Martinez said, scanning methodically through his binoculars. Most carrying sidearms, several with long guns. They move like they've had training. Because they have, Olivia replied quietly. Many of these individuals are former military. The words slipped out before she could reconsider, drawing sharp looks from the recruits. That level of specific intelligence wasn't consistent with a standard training scenario. It suggested actual operational knowledge of the target. Sergeant, Martinez began carefully, is this still an exercise, or are we conducting actual reconnaissance? Olivia hesitated. These recruits deserved to know the potential danger they faced, but revealing the true nature of the mission would directly contradict her orders. Before she could formulate a response, Wilson's urgent whisper interrupted her thoughts. Movement at the main building. They're bringing someone out. Through her spotting scope, Olivia watched as 2 armed men escorted a third figure from the central structure. The captive's hands were bound behind their back, head covered with what appeared to be a dark hood. The escorting guards moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals handling a prisoner. That's not role players, Diaz said, his voice dropping to a tense whisper. Those are actual restraints. The realization rippled through Alpha Team, like an electric current. This wasn't a training scenario with actors playing opposing forces. They were observing an actual militant group holding a real prisoner. Sergeant, Martinez said, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine concern, what exactly are we involved in here? Olivia weighed her options carefully, assessing the 4 faces now turned toward her with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. The situation had escalated beyond a simple training exercise, and continuing to maintain the pretense would only endanger these recruits further. They needed to understand what they were facing. This is a suspected domestic extremist group, she explained in a hushed tone. Intelligence suggests they're holding federal employees captive. Our mission was supposed to be observation only. Gather information for a proper response team. Supposed to be? Wilson caught the nuance immediately. Has that changed? Olivia gestured toward the compound. That wasn't in the briefing. They're moving the captives, which means something's happening. Their timeline has accelerated. Martinez's expression hardened as the implications became clear. We're not just training, are we? This is an actual operation disguised as an exercise. That's my assessment, Olivia confirmed. Colonel Mercer likely couldn't get authorization for a direct military action against domestic targets, so he's using this exercise as cover for intelligence gathering. That's not legal, Chen said, her voice barely audible. Posse Comitatus prohibits military operations on domestic soil, which is why we're here as a training unit rather than an operational force, Olivia replied grimly. Plausible. Deniability for the command structure. Diaz, who had maintained his security position while listening to the exchange, suddenly raised his hand in the universal signal for silence. The team froze, senses immediately heightened. Movement in the tree line southwest of our position, he whispered after a tense moment. 2 individuals, moving deliberately. They're searching for something or someone. Olivia shifted position carefully, using her spotting scope to scan the indicated direction. 2 men in camouflage clothing were moving through the forest, approximately 300 meters from their position, weapons at the ready. Their movement pattern wasn't random. They were conducting a deliberate search, expanding outward from the compound perimeter. Patrol? Martinez suggested. No, Olivia replied, a cold certainty settling in her stomach. They're searching specifically for observers. They know someone's watching them. But how? Chen asked. We've maintained noise and light discipline. Our position is concealed. Because this was anticipated, Olivia realized aloud. They were expecting surveillance. The question is whether they were tipped off or simply paranoid. The implications were disturbing. If the extremist group had been warned about potential military observation, it suggested either a leak at Fort Richardson or, more worryingly, inside support for their activities. We need to relocate, Olivia decided. Their search pattern will bring them to this position within 30 minutes. Martinez, begin breaking down the observation post. Wilson, plot us an exfiltration route that avoids likely patrol areas. Chen, maintain observation of the compound. Diaz, keep eyes on those searchers. The team responded with silent efficiency, each member focusing on their assigned task without question or hesitation. Despite their inexperience with actual combat operations, their training was asserting itself effectively. Olivia felt a grudging respect for their professionalism under pressure. Sergeant, Chen called softly, urgency in her voice. They're moving all 3 captives now, loading them into vehicles. Olivia quickly refocused her scope on the compound. 3 hooded figures were being escorted toward a pair of rugged SUVs, their hands bound behind them. The guards moved with increased urgency, suggesting a hastily implemented plan rather than scheduled transportation. They're evacuating, she concluded. They suspect they've been compromised, and they're moving the hostages to a secondary location. If they leave with those hostages, we lose them, Martinez said, stating the obvious but crucial fact. Any rescue operation would have to start from zero. Olivia faced a command decision that transcended the training scenario. Their mission parameters specified observation only, with strict orders against engagement. But those parameters had been established under the assumption that the hostage situation was stable. The rapidly changing circumstances demanded an immediate reassessment. New mission, she announced, her voice taking on the quiet authority that had once commanded elite operators in far more dangerous situations. We're going to track those vehicles and maintain surveillance on the hostages. Command needs to know where they're being relocated. Just the 4 of us? Wilson asked, his tone indicating concern rather than objection. 5, Olivia corrected. And yes, we're the only assets in position to respond. If we lose those hostages now, we may never recover them. The recruits exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that acknowledged both the danger and necessity of their new mission. Whatever doubts they might have had about Olivia's competence were temporarily suspended in the face of an actual crisis requiring immediate action. "What's the plan?" Martinez asked, deferring to her authority without the reluctance he'd shown during training. "We shadow the convoy at a safe distance," Olivia explained, already packing her observation equipment. "Martinez and I will take the lead. Wilson and Chen, you'll maintain communications with base and coordinate potential support. Diaz, you'll provide rear security and watch for pursuit." She paused, making eye contact with each recruit in turn. "This is no longer a training exercise. From this moment forward, consider all weapons hot and all threats real. These are not role players with blank ammunition. They are hostile forces who will use lethal force if they detect us. Is that understood?" The gravity of her words settled on the team. This was the moment when training transitioned to reality, when theoretical knowledge would be tested against actual life-or-death decisions. "Understood, Sergeant," they replied in near unison, their voices steady despite the tension evident in their postures. "One more thing," Olivia added, her hand moving to the secure pocket on her tactical vest. "From this point forward, call signs only. Minimize all unnecessary communication." She extracted a small black case and opened it to reveal 4 wireless earpieces, encrypted tactical communication devices that weren't part of standard training equipment. The recruits' expressions showed recognition of the advanced technology, followed by confusion about why a supposedly ordinary training sergeant would possess such specialized gear. "These operate on a frequency isolated from standard military channels," she explained, distributing the devices. "They're designed to resist jamming and interception. Use them only when necessary." Martinez accepted the earpiece, studying it briefly before meeting Olivia's gaze. "This isn't standard issue for training cadre." "No," she acknowledged, "it's not." The unspoken question hung in the air. Who exactly was Sergeant Olivia Reeves, and why did she possess equipment typically reserved for special operations units? But urgent circumstances pushed the question aside as the sound of vehicle engines starting echoed from the compound below. "They're moving," Chen reported. 2 vehicles heading north on the access road." "Then so are we," Olivia responded, shouldering her pack and checking her sidearm with practiced efficiency. "Stay low, maintain distance, and above all, do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Our primary mission is intelligence gathering, not direct action." As Alpha Team moved out, following a route parallel to the compound's access road, Olivia felt the familiar calm of operational focus settling over her. The persona of Sergeant Reeves, the quiet, unassuming training instructor, was receding, replaced by the tactical decision-making and command presence that had once made Captain Alexandra Morgan one of the most effective special operations officers in the field. The transition wasn't lost on Martinez, who fell in beside her as they navigated the dense forest. "You've done this before," he observed quietly. "For real." Olivia didn't respond immediately, focusing on maintaining visual contact with the vehicles now moving along the road below their position. After a moment, she offered a single measured response. "Stay focused on the mission, Martinez. Questions about my background can wait until those hostages are safe." Olivia reactivated her comlink as she retreated from the compound perimeter, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who understood exactly how quickly tactical situations could deteriorate. "Alpha Team, be advised, security posture has changed. Possible compromise. Maintain positions but prepare for immediate extraction." Martinez's response was immediate. "Roger that. Team is on standby. What's the situation with the hostages?" "Confirmed," 3 individuals being held in the northeast section of the main building. Single guard, basic restraints. They appear uninjured but are under close watch. As Olivia navigated the dense underbrush, a flash of light caught her peripheral vision. The distinct beam of a tactical flashlight sweeping through the trees approximately 200 meters to her west. The extremists had deployed search teams into the surrounding forest, multiple patrols moving into the woods, she reported quietly. They're searching systematically. Someone tipped them off about potential observation. Wilson's voice came through next, tense but controlled. Sergeant, base communications just went offline. I can't reach command post or the other training. Teams. The implication was clear and disturbing. Either the extremists had signal jamming capabilities that extended far beyond the compound, or someone at Fort Richardson had deliberately severed their communication links. Either scenario suggested a level of coordination that transcended a simple domestic terrorist operation. Switch to alternate frequencies, Olivia instructed, though she suspected it would prove futile. If you can't establish contact, we operate. Under the assumption that we're on our own until further notice, she reached Martinez's position minutes later, finding him and Chen maintaining disciplined observation of the compound while staying concealed in the deepening twilight. Martinez's expression reflected the gravity of their situation, the recognition that what had begun as a training exercise had transformed into something far more dangerous. "What's happening, Sergeant?" he asked, his earlier cockiness replaced by the focused attention of a soldier facing genuine threat. "The situation is evolving rapidly," Olivia replied, keeping her voice steady to project the calm authority these recruits needed. "Based on their activities, I believe the extremist group is preparing for some kind of operation, possibly within the next 24 hours. "An attack?" Chen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Most likely. The hostages may be leverage or a distraction from their primary objective." Martinez processed this information, his tactical training asserting itself despite his limited experience. "We need to alert command, get a QRF deployed to secure the hostages and neutralize the threat." "That would be the standard protocol," Olivia agreed. "But with communications compromised and our position potentially exposed, we face a more immediate decision." She knelt, using a small twig to sketch the compound layout in the soft earth. "The hostages are here, northeast corner of the main building. Guard patrols circulate at 15-minute intervals. The majority of personnel are concentrated in the central area, focused on preparation for whatever they're planning." Martinez studied the crude diagram, recognizing the implicit question behind Olivia's briefing. "You're considering a rescue operation, with just the 5 of us." It wasn't a question, but a realization, one that carried both disbelief and dawning understanding of their responsibility. Olivia met his gaze directly, seeing the moment when the full weight of their situation settled on his shoulders. "These aren't weekend warriors playing militia," she said quietly. "They're highly trained former military personnel led by someone with special operations experience. They have hostages who may be killed if their operation is compromised, and they're preparing for some action that likely threatens civilian lives." "But we're not equipped for a hostage rescue," Wilson objected, joining them from his observation position. "We have limited ammunition, no breaching equipment, no medical evacuation capabilities, and minimal combat experience," Chen added. Glancing at her fellow recruits, Olivia acknowledged their concerns with a single nod. All true. Under normal circumstances, this would be a mission for Delta or SEAL Team 6 with full operational support. But circumstances aren't normal, and we're the only assets currently in position. The unspoken reality hung between them. If they withdrew to seek reinforcements, the hostages might be moved again or killed, and whatever operation the extremists were planning might proceed without interference. The moral burden of action versus inaction weighed heavily in the gathering darkness. "I can't order you to participate in this," Olivia continued. This goes beyond training parameters and involves risks none of you signed up for. Each of you needs to make your own decision. The recruits exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that reflected both their training bond and the enormity of the choice before them. Martinez, as team leader, spoke first. With respect, Sergeant, if you're staying, we're staying. Those hostages need help, and we're the only ones who can provide it right now. Wilson nodded his agreement. We've trained for this, maybe not with live ammunition against actual hostiles, but the principles are the same. We know what needs to be done. The mission comes first, Chen said simply. That's what you've been teaching us from day one. Diaz, who had maintained his security position throughout the discussion, added his voice through the comlink. I've got a clean shot on the Northern Guard tower if we need it. Just say the word. Their commitment should have been reassuring, but Olivia felt a weight of responsibility that transcended normal command concerns. These weren't seasoned operators making informed decisions about acceptable risks. They were trainees volunteering for a potentially lethal mission based on limited information and misplaced confidence in their own capabilities. Before you commit, she said carefully, you need to understand something. This operation carries risks beyond what you've been prepared for. We'll be operating without authorization against American citizens on domestic soil. If things go wrong, there will be no official support, no recognition of your actions, and potentially severe consequences regardless of our intentions. Martinez's expression hardened with resolve rather than hesitation. Those hostages are American. Citizens too, whatever consequences come, we'll face them together. The others nodded their agreement, their faces showing the solemn determination of soldiers who understood the gravity of their choice while accepting its necessity. It was a moment that transcended training, the point where theoretical commitment transformed into practical willingness to risk everything for a mission they believed in. Then we plan carefully and execute precisely, Olivia decided. We have one advantage. They're focused on their upcoming operation, not expecting an immediate rescue attempt. We use that distraction to our advantage. Over the next hour, as darkness settled fully over the mountains, Alpha Team developed an operation plan that reflected both textbook hostage rescue protocols and the practical limitations of their personnel and equipment. Olivia guided their planning with carefully measured input, offering suggestions and refinements while allowing them to apply their training to the tactical problem. We move at 0200, she concluded as they finalized the details. That gives us 4 hours to conduct final reconnaissance, prepare equipment, and get into position. Guard alertness will be at its lowest point, and most of the compound will be sleeping. Martinez nodded, reviewing their crude but effective operation diagram one final time. Chen and Wilson will create a diversion at the south perimeter. Enough to draw attention and personnel away from the main building. Diaz provides overwatch from the eastern ridge, neutralizing the rooftop sentries if necessary. You and I enter through the northeast access point, secure the hostages, and extract to Rally Point Bravo. Remember, Olivia emphasized, speed and surprise are our only advantages. We're significantly outnumbered and outgunned. If we lose the element of surprise at any point, we immediately shift to Contingency Plan Delta, extract the hostages through the emergency route regardless of opposition. The recruits acknowledged her instructions with focused attention, each mentally rehearsing their role in the operation. Despite their limited experience, Olivia could see the quality of their training asserting itself in their methodical preparation and attention to detail. As the team conducted final equipment checks and established their pre-mission positions, Martinez approached Olivia privately, his expression reflecting a question that had clearly been troubling him throughout their planning. "Sergeant," he began carefully, "you've done this before. Not training exercises, actual hostage extractions. It wasn't phrased as a question, but the implication was clear. Olivia considered her response carefully, weighing operational security against the trust these recruits needed to place in her leadership. "Focus on the mission, Martinez," she replied, neither confirming nor denying his assessment. "When those hostages are safe, there will be time for questions about my background." Martinez held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once, a gesture that conveyed both acceptance of her non-answer and a new respect that transcended their previous training relationship. Whatever doubts he might have harbored about her capabilities had been replaced by the recognition that Sergeant Olivia Reeves was something more than the unassuming training instructor they had dismissed. "We won't let you down, Sergeant," he said simply. As he moved away to continue preparations, Olivia felt the familiar pre-mission calm settling over her consciousness, the focused clarity that had once defined Captain Alexandra Morgan's operational mindset. After 7 years of hiding in plain sight, circumstances had forced her to step back into the role she had abandoned. The worn boots that had drawn mockery from these recruits would once again carry her into danger, not as an instructor demonstrating theoretical concepts, but as the operator she had never truly stopped being. The mission unfolded with the precision of a well-orchestrated symphony, Chen and Wilson's diversion drawing guards away, Diaz's expert marksmanship silencing sentries, without alarm, and Olivia leading Martinez through shadows to the hostages. When Blackburn appeared unexpectedly, the recruits witnessed Olivia transform before their eyes, neutralizing her former commander with moves that revealed her elite training. As dawn broke over the mountains, Alpha Team escorted the rescued hostages to safety, while federal agents swarmed the compound, preventing an attack that would have claimed hundreds of lives. 2 months later, Olivia stood before these same recruits at their graduation ceremony. No longer did they see worn boots and a forgettable instructor. They saw the legendary Captain Alexandra Morgan, whose identity had finally been restored after the truth about the Yemen operation emerged. The mockery had transformed into profound respect. "The boots you mocked," she told them, "carried me through 37 hostage rescues and 14 denied operations before you were even old enough to enlist. But your boots now carry something equally valuable, the understanding that appearances mean nothing, and true capability reveals itself when lives are on the line." Martinez approached her after the ceremony, standing taller in his dress uniform. "Thank you for teaching us what no training manual ever could, Captain." "Just remember," Olivia replied with a rare smile, "sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the people you least expect." The mission that saved those hostages became legendary within special operations circles. The day when untested recruits followed a forgotten hero into danger and emerged as warriors who understood the true meaning of service. Was someone underestimated in your life who later proved their exceptional worth? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you want more incredible true tales of unexpected heroes, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Remember, real strength often hides in plain sight, sometimes in a pair of worn-out boots.